Today we are going to talk about publication tips specific for students in the preventive care program. So I hope if you have an idea about publication, you have a little more skills once you get to the project. For some of you, it might be too early because your project is going to happen in 2 years. But I have a few students still that are in the middle. Some are in the first year, but some are in the second and third year already, and they have to deal with those issues. Yeah. By the way, the only student that is in the third year that is graduating next year and is currently starting his project is Wennes Race. And Wennes already have 6 publications with us. So he does not need to attend this class. But that's another thing that I mentioned. If you want to get involved, maybe not in the first year, but you can review papers, you can participate in some of our studies, and then you can get the skills. When you get to your project, it's going to be a piece of cake to do a publication.
Yes, okay, I'm glad you're offering this now, because then, even though my project is not for a few years out because I'm new, it's good to know already some tips about, hey, these journals require word counts, or they require a certain format, so you can already be assembling your data and your writings in that way, so it saves on the editing. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, and you mentioned one important thing in terms of publication that I will comment, but most of the publications that we do are related to the journals. So each journal has a different system and regulations. So if you have a topic in your project, the main thing first is to decide what is the project. And the second thing after you decided that is to figure it out what is the journal that you are going to publish it. And then you adjust your literature review, your methods and everything else, and abstract and wording number to the paper, to the journal that you choose. But it is important to know the general requirements. We will talk more about that. So why should we be involved in publishing? And I mentioned here 5 aspects. First is because you might need to go there anyways, because it's a requirement. You have to submit 1 paper for this program. After you make your project or deliver or implemented your project, you have to provide 1 paper. It does not need to be accepted, though. We hope that will be, but the requirement goes until submission, and that's it, and that's all. After that, I can guarantee that you are going to be published, and I'm saying that because of my experience. Let me share what I did with I finished my dissertation in the year 2000. And do you know when I published my paper? In the year 2010. Well, when I finished in 2000, there was not a requirement for publication. I just told my committee that I might publish, but then I went to work and I went overseas, and then I forgot about that. When they invite me again to teach here in the year 2007, I start thinking about my project, and then it took me 3 years still to publish. And I'll tell you, I submit 1 journal, was rejected, then I submitted to the second one, and then it was accepted. So, but now it's a need. You might need to submit it. And I'm telling you, if we don't get accepted in the first, we go to the second. My rule is like that. We submit the first. If it's not accepted, we submit it as it is without any changes. Even if the editor sends some information, we don't change. We just go to the second one as it is. Then if we have another rejection, then we go over the changes and make changes to submit a third time. And I have papers that were submitted 4 times and then they were accepted. So it's almost impossible that you are not gonna be published. Another thing is important for your curriculum vitae. So it's important to have this in your CV in any area that you are going to work. If you are going to work in the corporation, if you want to work in the community as a public health specialist, or if you are going to work in the clinics, is important. And mostly if you want to work, if you are going to work in the academics, it's important to have this knowledge and these publications. So you can imagine this, my student that already published 6 papers. When he finished, he has a lot of publications already to recruit a job or to sign up for a job application. So it's important for job finding and job promotion. So sometimes it's not just to have a job, but if you have more publication, you might, of course, if you have a DRPH, is going to help you for the promotion. But a DRPH with publications, will be even better. And the ultimate reason is the contribution to science. So once you do a project, once you publish something, it helps the knowledge on that area to improve. So one of the things that we have to consider once you need to find a journal is to find the right one. So those are the things that are important. Consider the impact factor of the journal. Look at the journals that you have in your reference when you do a literature review. Go to Jane. We will go over those steps one by one, but I just open up here. And then go to Jane or other ways, browsers that can give you estimation of journals that match your topic. Prefer journals that have open access and Medline indexed. That is a little challenge because they might cost a bit. I have one journal that I think a few months ago charged me $3,000 for a submission, and I just gave up. I mean, we cannot do that. But sometimes you can get a grant, and then you put the open access fees in your grant. Most of the grants will accept that. By the way, I have a grant now for one of my projects, and I am just finishing one manuscript for that, and I have the money already reserved to pay for whatever charge that they do. Then you have to decide what reference system you want to use. Most of our projects use the American Psychological Association, the APA alphabetical order. But as we are clinics, we are clinical. Most of, I would say, in my experience, is half and half. Half of our printed published journals are in the APA, and other half are in medical or the Vancouver system that use numbers as it appears. So the first reference is number 1, and they go over that. The reference system, the APA system, is that in the manuscript, in the text, you have the name of the person and the year. And then the last name of the person will be alphabetically listed in the reference list in the end of the document. Okay, what is impact factor? Impact factor is, how much these journals are being cited in literature. And then here is an example. They get a number of times the articles were cited in 2008 and 2009. The number of articles published in 2008 and 2009 and cited in 2010. And then the number of citable items published in 2008 and 2009. And so they divide one by one. So
could I ask a very quick question?
Go ahead.
On the previous slide at the bottom, it said, beware of the predatory journals. And if you could just explain that a little bit, because I think all of us maybe at some point or another have some experience with being contacted by journals that we've never heard of, and they want us to give them our papers. How do they know about us? And then how do we know that they are like not on the up and up?
Thank you for mentioning that. We have one student that submitted for a predatory journal, and that was a mess. As I mentioned, I'm gonna talk item by item, and then, by the way, I have already downloaded in Canvas in the DRPH student preventive care student community a list of predatory journals. So once we look for a journal, we go to that list and see if the journal is there. So if it's there, we forget it. Another way is that I talk to my librarian, to the School of Public Health librarian all the time, once I have a new journal that I don't know, and then ask her to take a look to see if this is something that we can go with. And most of the time they have helped us and prevent us to go in a direction. I'll talk more about that when we go to the topic, okay?
Okay, thank you.
So impact factor. In general, most impact factors journals, like the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, this impact journal is more than 10. And some of them, the American Journal of, the Journal of American Medical Association, the JAMA, one of the most famous publishing journals in the United States, is more than 30, I believe. So those are very cited journals. And then in preventive care, depends on the excitement of your project. The design of the project will indicate where or what kind of journal you can go. Usually to publishing in JAMA, I have seen some cross-sectional studies, but most of the most accepted journals or papers there are randomized controlled trials that are with years of follow-up. And that's is not gonna happen in our papers, because our papers have to finish in 1 year. So we have this restriction, unless the article and the results are very exciting, and that might be able to go to those high impact journals. Usually our journal's impact goes between 1 and 2 or below 2 and below 1. This is most of our journals from dissertation that we go. So those are the browsers that I mentioned that you should go, and then put there the name of your, the title of your article, and then you have some suggestions for papers, for journals to submit your paper. I have checked all of them, but we use mostly the Jane. Jane comes from the spelling. It is Journal Author Name Estimator. And this is the page that we have. You have here the email where you can find this, jane.biosemantics.org. And then you just put the name of the title of your abstract there, or you can even put the abstract if you want, if it's a short one. So I put here microbiome and fiber. By the way, this is the title of my latest manuscript that we are trying to submit. And then let's see in the next slide what they came out with suggestions. So here you have suggestive names for that. Nutrients, nutrition reviews, PLOS1, gut microbes, advances in nutrition, and etc. So you can see here, that's the first thing against predatory journal. If you go on that, you see, maybe let's see if we have one journal here that that would be problematic. No, most of them are either high quality or Medline indexed. So if they are Medline indexed, so you don't have a problem. Maybe the ones there, Frontiers in Microbiology and Dentistry Journal, are the two ones that are not Medline indexed, but they are in PubMed, PMC, and they are high quality open access. So most likely those are peer reviewed journal. But these I would cross them according to my list, just in case. And you see in the right, the one before the last column on the right, you have the impact factor for those journals. As I mentioned, I would not go by something more than 3 or 4 because it's going to be very hard. So Cell Reports is 4.9, gastroenterology is 5.7, and then Cell Host and Microbe is 6.2. Most likely my or preventive care papers might not get there to those high, consider high impact factor journals. Any question on that? Because I'm going to change to the next subject here. That's the predatory journal list. So I put here just A, B, but this list has more than 100 types of journals. And it's unfortunate that we have this kind of journals that are there it's just a scheme to get your money, and then they don't publish anything. We have a situation with us one time, because not all predatory journals are predatory, really predatory. What I mean is that we publish a few articles in a journal that is from India, and then from the Cloud Publications. And then we figured out that Cloud Publications is in the predatory journal list. However, the journal is not really predatory according to the term predatory. That would be a scheme. Let me explain a little more about that. The journal, the articles that we publish are not in PubMed, they are not in Medline, they are not in open access, but they are reached by Google Scholar, so they are published. So that's the difference between a predatory and a kind of a predatory intermediate. And they were considered, the Cloud Publications were in the predatory list because of the issue of peer reviewing. And that's the situation. If you don't have a good peer reviewing system, somehow they put your name here. But it does not mean that they are not going over your paper and getting your money and not publishing it. They publish. So those are the predatory intermediate. So we fell on that. We are not publishing with that journal anymore, but the papers were published. So we are contacting the publisher to see why they can have the peer reviewing, because it's not that hard to have peer reviewing, and that's some discussion that we are going over. But in any case, I believe we are very conscious of that, and we will not, even in the predatory intermediate journals, we will not send anything. If we have doubts about any journals, we will work with you together on that. But when we have doubts about any journals, we will consider other options and not going to journals that have at least a predatory history. So any question on predatory journals, Michelle?
No, that's it. Thank you very much. I have just been curious about them because probably over the past 6 months or a year, I am getting emails from some journals, that I've never heard of, and even some of them like engineering or things that don't even have anything to do with my major. And I'm just curious how they even find us. I guess they have lists of students or something, but yeah, I've never done anything with any of them. I just was curious because it seems like it's more commonly happening.
Yeah, I received those lists a lot too, and I use those. I'll tell you, some of them are really journals, are real journals, and sometimes they need. Let me show you what happened last year. I have an article for a former student about childhood obesity, and it is being rejected a lot in the past, at least 2 times. And this journal, pediatric journal, contacted me and said, okay, we have an opening for a publication and our fees are 500. Now we are gonna charge just 100 for your paper. So I jump on that and I check the journal, I check with the librarian, it was okay. So we submitted, we were accepted, and then they wanna charge me the 500. And then I said, okay, I have this email here that you're supposed to just charge 100. And that's, and we got it. So some of those lists, we have to check, it might be okay. Some of them would be journals that are not indexed, but they are published. And so we need to consider. I would say one thing that I didn't mention here is that once we go for publication, we go for a higher impact journal first, and a more credentialed journal first. And then we go second and third time with a lower impact. And even if a journal is not in PubMed, we still can publish it. It's better than not publish. And that's my point. In the last 2 years, we have published about 20 journals from former preventive care specialists that never published. So we didn't publish in predatory journals, but we published somewhere. And that's the point. We have our publications and the world is knowing what we are doing. And then it contributed to science in some ways.
Mm-hmm. I have just one quick question.
Okay, go ahead.
So about journals, you've mentioned, it seems like you only apply for publication to one journal at a time.
Yes.
So you don't apply to 2 or 3 and just hope that one of them accepts your article for publication, correct?
Yes, that's okay. The way we do. We don't apply to 2 because if those two accept, we might be in trouble. And we don't want to submit to a journal and tell them, I don't want to publish in your journal, because this reflects badly on our reputation for future submissions. If we submit to a journal, it's exclusive, and we wait for their time to give us the answer. Sometimes it's a long process. Let me share one with you. We have one article that we did 2 years ago from a student that finished the program in 2015. She never published, so I got the article and I submit the article to the Journal of Community Diversity. It's a very high, not high, but a very reputable journal, Journal of Community Diversity. And then because most of the participants were Hispanics in that journal, and it was about childhood obesity among Hispanics. They reviewed the journal and review, and after 1 year, they gave me the answer that we'll publish. And then it took 6 months more after they decide to publish. So I wait for 1.5 years, but I published. So because the journal was reputable and the article was not the best paper that we did, but the topic was good. And then childhood obesity always make the news. And then we publish on that. But I have to wait 1.5 years. And I never forgot that it pays off, but most of the time students are not willing to wait that long. Okay, let's move forward. So now let's get something in terms of scientific writing. The first one, now you shows your paper, you have the title of your project, and now you have to work on the structure of your article. The best one is to get the guidelines for the chosen journal and get an article published on that journal. And I always do that. I mean, I go to the guidelines and then I get an article. Why? Sometimes an article is even better, because if you have doubts about the tables, you go there and take a look of the tables, how they do that. If you have doubts about the reference, you go to the reference you have there. Instead of going to the guidelines and find where is the item that you need to go. Of course, the guidelines will tell you about number of words, structure of the abstract, number of words in the abstract, number of words in the paper, number of tables that they will accept, number of figures that they will accept, and the topics that the subtitles that they need in your article. There is a general thing. In the bottom, you have the most division or description of the articles, like a literature review or background, methods, results, discussion, conclusion. This is a classic one. But journals have a little different feature according to the journal. And related to the abstract also, most of the scientific journals like to have these 5 items here: introduction or background, methods, results, discussion, conclusion, 5 items in the abstract. But some journals will ask you to do an abstract in just 1 paragraph. And they say, okay, such 800 words or 500 words, you put whatever you did and what is that you found in just 1 paragraph. So I mentioned here 2 major types of abstracts. There are more, but in general, they have this 1 paragraph, or sometimes depends on the amount of words. The paragraph can be big, not just a small one. And then you have the structure, and the structure goes with those, at least 4 of those, 5 if you need a conclusion. Sometimes you include the conclusion in the discussion. But again, we need to check the instructions from the target journal that you have. So in terms of background and literature review, what you need to do is a summary of the literature in your topic. We will go with this in more details when you do your project, but again, is a summarize of what is the literature that you have that talk about the topic. Like we are preparing a manuscript for the blue zones, a description of the blue zone in Loma Linda. I have one student that did already in the Adventist Health Study, did all the research, and then when she was summarizing the literature, she has to go and put in the topic for her search, like longevity, blue zones, and visit the areas or the researchers that she has in her references. Well, she is. I think I'm confusing here. You cannot have a reference before you write the article, but at least you have an idea about longevity in the world or blue zones in the world, and then you find the most important articles according to your topic. If it's longevity, what is the longevity factors? And then you have to describe the importance of your topic, describe what you are going to do or at the end of the literature review, and what is missing in the literature. In this Blue Zone article, the gap in the literature is that most of other blue zones have a description of their local centenarians, and Loma Linda does not have. Loma Linda has a description of the centenarians in the Adventist Health Study, but not the local here in the area of Loma Linda and Inland Empire. And so that's something that we might be missing in the literature. But that's another thing. Depends on what is your topic. You have to find what is that your study will fill up in the literature. If they don't have information in one area, and this is something that we have to, from the beginning of the project, we have to find this as a justification for your paper. Even when I apply for IRB here, I need to justify my papers there, explaining what is that I am trying to find that is new. So that's the point here. And then in the methods, you put the description of their study. If it's a cross-section, is a clinical trial, is a crossover, quasi-experimental, that is a pre and post design, observational and pure experimental, etc. Most of our studies in preventive care will be cross-sectional, controlled trials, and quasi-experimental. Those are the three more common. When you go to data analysis course, you have this a little more. But cross-sectional is just a survey. Clinical trials is when you have a control and an intervention group. And crossover is when you have the control intervention group, and then you exchange the groups in the second period of the study. And quasi-experimental is the one that you just do a pre and post, and with the same group. You don't have a control group, but you have a pre and post evaluation of a program. And by the way, this is very used in health education program. You implement a program for the prevention of diabetes, and then you see if the group improve. You can put a pre and post questionnaire and see what they improve in the knowledge. You can do pre and post evaluation of the group. It's not very scientifically accepted because of the lack of a control, but it still is something that we can have in preventive care. You describe your sample, you describe the methods that you use for power analysis. Power analysis you will learn. We do kind of a little bit of a formula to find what is the sample that you'll need for your project that will reach statistical significance for that, or clinical significance. So if you want to see what is, like if you want to decrease cholesterol in your population by 5%, how many sample of participants you need to have in each group or in the total group to reach that significance of 5%. And then they will say, well, you need 100 subjects, at least 100 subjects to reach some statistical significance. It's a little complicated, but it's important to have that. Some of our papers do not have power analysis, and simply because sometimes you have huge numbers. If you go and you already have 500 or more, I would say over 300 power analysis is gonna be okay, 300 participants. But it's always good to have power analysis, because sometimes we count on those huge values many times, even with database. I remember we have, one of my students was using the CHIS database, or the California Health Information System, and she has 1,000 people there. So she did the power analysis, but we didn't need that. What happened is that when we were doing the research, half of those 1,000 didn't have the BMI reported or measured. I think was reported. As they didn't have the BMI, we have to exclude 500 for that. So we have 1,000, now we have 500. And then the issue of power analysis was important. Would this be significant to reach the results? So the results will be significant with a lower number of people. That's what's important to have it. Then you have to put the recruitment methods. You have to see that you are respecting the ethics and the concern about discrimination and the freedom of participation in studies, all the IRB issues there. And the analysis methods that you are going to use is to sample it's ANOVA, or it is a multiple regression analysis, or other methods, correlation methods or whatever. So you have to describe that in the methods. Then we have the results. The results are the second more important point in a paper. So this is where you put your findings. Usually, we should start with a research question that is in the bottom. If you put a research questions that you want to see, remember I mentioned about fiber and microbiome. So my research question is that eating more fiber will improve the amount of microflora or bacteria that are positive, that are benefic for the colon, or not. So that's my research question. So when I go in the results, I would say we found that what are the now I forgot the name of this, the bacillum, whatever bacillum it was there, and the other bacteria that are good for health, according to several studies. In our study, were increased in fiber. In fact, we didn't find that. Bifidobacteria. Bifidobacteria is the name that I was trying to remember. And then we didn't find that. So if we didn't find that, but we found something else there that was good, we can exchange and then put the positive results first. But that's my opinion. it varies. Some people like to put the negative first, and because the negative is more important. But in our case, we put well, I would put in my case, I would put the positive results of the findings, even if they are not in the research question order. What is important is when you put the results there and you go to the discussion, you follow the order of your results. And I will talk about that in the next slide. So you put the tables there. Usually we have 3 tables, and most journals accept at least 3 tables. So we put one for the description of the whole population, demographics and things like that. And then we put 2 more tables with the results according to the results that we have. When you put the tables, be sure that the table should have a life on itself. So maybe those are details, but it is important to have an idea now. You put a title in the table that is self-descriptive of the results, and put any and put the p-values and n, that is the sample size of that table. Sometimes you have a sample size of 600, but in that result you only use 500. So you have to put the sample size of that table for those results. Yeah, and you don't put any positive or negative feelings now in the results. It's just plain results. This is what we found. And summarize them as much as possible. You don't need to repeat the results that you have in the table in the text. In the text, you put just the results that are kind of more important for your research. And then you go to the discussion. The discussion is the life of an article. By the way, I will tell you that an article well written, even if the topic is not exciting, will be published easier. So it's important to work with grammar. It's important to work with scientific writing. It's important to change words there, to use grammar check, Grammarly, whatever, to improve the quality of your writing, because this will make an effect. And when you go to this discussion, is even more important there. Well, discussion, you just, the secret of discussion is to put your results and then mention what happened in the literature. So if you find that fiber is in your work, you found that bifidobacteria increase according to increased fiber intake, then when you go to discuss your findings, you go to the literature and see if there is anybody that mentioned any study that confirmed that. And then you didn't find, so you say, okay, we found this, even though many other people found differently or didn't find anything. Many times when you see gaps in the literature to start with, to begin with, you might not find anything. So, well, this is a new finding that we did according to our results, and we found this, so it's something for us to discuss. So if you don't find anything in the literature, and then whenever you mention a study in the literature, you have to put the reference there. Then once you finish that, you make suggestions for the maybe if you want to do a little more research on that area, or what kind of studies could give a little better results. If you have a problem with sample size, if you have a problem with sometimes you do a research in one corner of the world, you cannot generalize. So then you suggest, well, a more cultural or multiple races study, multiple populations will give results that are more significant for the world. Or you just focus on, if it's African Americans, you focus on African Americans. If it's Native Americans, if it's Hispanics or whatever. And try to explain reasons for not finding what you're supposed to find. Most of the studies so far in terms of microbiome are saying that fiber intake in the foods hasn't been able to change the microbiome. Only when they give supplements that they are seeing change in the microflora, intestinal microflora. So it looks like our finding is going to go in the same direction. We are still exploring if there is any other difference. But then you can say, well, in our case, we go to the literature. And then we might put some extra possibilities of saying that, okay, our study was 10 weeks. Maybe if you have this study done in 1 year, we might have a little more time for this bacteria to develop. If they go in high intake for a longer period, maybe the results would be that. If you have something to back you up on that in the literature, you just put that. If you don't, you just leave that. And then you already mentioned the design that you could justify or explain some change on design that will improve other potential future studies. And then you have the conclusions, summarize the important results, and then make applications for public health and make suggestions for research studies. So for public health, you talk about public health in general, and you can make applications for clinicians also. Preventive care is a clinical degree, so you might be able to say, okay, we found that eating more fiber will benefit a person that has a high cholesterol level, and then you just are helping in the clinical application of your results. And then you can make suggestions in the conclusion for additional research studies, as you mentioned in the discussion, but just in a phrase. Well, we suggest that a multiple regression study or observational studies or a longer period study or a study with a higher sample would provide better results. The authorships is very, my time is almost gone. Eh? We have a few minutes. The authorship is something that you have to think. For medical science and health science, I mean, most the ones that use number in the references, those papers consider the first author as the most important, the last author as the second most important, or the mentor. Most of my articles, when I have my students, I go by the last author. However, when the topic is social sciences, most that use the APA format, the first author is important and the second author is the main contributor for the paper and should be mentioned there, not as the last one in the paper. You have to acknowledge who are the people that you don't have, but if you want, those are the things that you write a few words for them. And then this is the areas that we are looking for people to get involved. We have spirituality and health survey. We have stress among African Americans paper that we need to review. We have another survey with stress and spirituality that nobody is working with that now. And then we still have the Hong Kong lifestyle study and the polypharma study that has some research analysis to be done on that. And then would be good to have someone interested to be involved in those studies. And that's all for today. Thank you very much. We finish in 1 p.m. I will stop recording. I will stop sharing now. Well, we have 4 people. Thank you very much. I have time for questions if you have them.
I have one question.
Go ahead.
Is it, in your opinion, say like I have multiple interests and I would like to maybe conduct some research in like 3 different areas, and maybe potentially get these published in different areas. Do you feel like that's a better approach? Or I've always heard, no, you should zero in on one area and try to become like the expert or a relatively well-known commentator or researcher in that one area. What is your opinion about that?
Well, for the sake of preventive care in your project, it's good to narrow down and have one area and focus that. For the sake of preventive care, it's a little complicated. I don't have an area of expertise, and this is a problem for me. Many of my colleagues say, well, you should focus on stress or focus on diabetes, and my focus is in chronic diseases, and it's a little hard for researchers and for creating a name on that area. But still, is preventive care. So as I teach preventive care and I push the students to go to preventive care, I can be a little open on that. One of the areas that I focus mostly is obesity. This is one of the main, obesity, overweight, and those are the things that we are more concerned and trying to do more research on that area. That it will affect a series of other related diseases, and it looks like is a rite of passage. If you want to deal with diabetes, you have to go with obesity. Hypertension, high cholesterol, heart disease, stroke, even cancer, they have to pass to overweight and obesity. That's why I'm focusing more on that area.
I have a question. So I missed that on the first half of the presentation. Sorry, I was at work. But did you maybe speak about, or could you touch on the financial portion of getting published? I spoke with a professor before and they were like, it's super expensive. And I was like, well, then how do we navigate that?
Yeah, I didn't mention much about that. I just mentioned that if you can have a grant would be good. But we are currently we're exploring options for publications that do not charge. Unfortunately, the journals that are high impact, they don't charge, but it's hard to get to them. Like the JAMA that I mentioned, the Lancet, and the Journal of American Clinical Nutrition, there is no charge for that. But to get there, I mean, with a high impact of 20 or more, with our type of articles, we barely can make that. So I would say what the students have done here is that we focus on the papers that do not charge, not high impact journals, but do not charge first. Or if we have a grant, we can apply them. The other student, I remember last time a student got some grants in the school, some awards. I believe you guys sign up for awards. And then she got $2,000 on the awards, and that money she used to pay for the paper. So you have to be smart. It's not the answer is not simple, but there is a possibility to publish in a very, I would say, reputable journal without paying. It's just a matter of search. And we are creating that list of journals as I speak. I have Diane Han working on piling up these journals that are reputable, that are not too low high impact, not too low impact factor, and that don't have a charge for them. And sometimes the charge are very minimal. Sometimes the charge is $100. There is one journal that we work that is $500. And then what we do with that, I have a little bit of budget for that. And so if we divide among the co-authors, we can find, I have done that a lot, I'll tell you. Like if you have $1,000 there, my budget is 300, 200, 300 from my side. So, and then we divide if we have more authors, if they agree. Not all of them will agree. Sometimes we divide between three and then we publish. So we have to do all of these things. I learned that in the third world country that I came from. So we have to bargain. I have done one thing that you cannot imagine. I have contact the editor of the journal and say, okay, your price is too much for us. We can pay half of that. And they accepted. So all of these we can play around and juggle and get our papers published.
Thank you. That's really promising. For the projects you mentioned, what's the time commitment to those? Because I am interested, but I want to make sure if I were to join, I would be able to commit, you know?
You mean for the ones that we have?
Yeah, the end of the presentation, you listed.
Okay. Well, as I don't have anybody involved on that, I would like to have someone that we can discuss that, but the time is not much. Is mostly, well, you have to respond, I mean, in 1 or 2 weeks of when you started. I tell you, in the beginning, I have 2 students that in your cohort, I will not mention names here, that decided, okay, I'm gonna help. And they start doing what I asked them and they disappear. Simply didn't do anything. And say, well, of course, this is not a commitment. But they didn't have an idea of how can they be involved in the project and involved in their area of expertise. But my return is about 2 weeks. If I give you something, I need you to do a short literature review. Many papers have done, like I have one about stress in African Americans that was done maybe in 2015 and never published. So I need to have someone to look at the reference year and then find some new reference for us to start the background, not with reference from 2000 and 2005, because this is too old.
Right.
And then my period is that, okay, in 2 weeks you could do that. It's not a big deal, but you have to have some time. Yeah, maybe 2 or 3 hours during this period you can do that. But that's what I'm talking about.
Okay, that's reasonable because I was involved in some systematic reviews and they were pretty intense. And so I just wanted to get an idea because I want to kind of build up that skill set of writing for publications and writing academically and just really building on that because I think I love writing and I want it to be a part of my career.
Yeah, just email me.